Okay, we're going to do something here that we haven't done in CREST before. That is, we're going to give you a quiz. Don't worry, you won't have to turn in your results or anything. All right. So, Dan, how do you think you would have done? You would have answered all those questions?
Well, you did that quiz on me with another group, and I got most of them. So, yeah, we do need to be reminded as we look back.
That's why it's good to keep all these notes and the curriculum in a place where you can refer back to it. Because we know you're not going to remember everything, but you'll at least have everything there that it can be a resource for you.
Yes. And friends, I should tell you that we've heard from a number of our students, a good number, that they keep that binder right there and they open it up and refer to it quite often. And it keeps it fresh because there's tons of good stuff in here that you need to use. But if you don't pull it down and review, you just might forget.
Yeah. Like Dan does. All right. So we're going to take a look at the CREST journey again from about 35,000 feet. In other words, big picture. And why CREST leads you through the themes and milestones that it does. There is an order and a design to all this. And so we want to kind of go through it and hopefully you can see that design take place. Typical leadership courses start with the mission and responsibility of leadership, and then work through a list of how-tos. So the focus tends to be on what and how. CREST, on the other hand, we begin with a focus on why and who, and the who is you. Because on the journey from success to significance, those are the deeper questions that matter most. Who are you, and why do you do what you do? And who are the ones you are working with, and why do they do what they do? That's our focus. So Dan, get us started on a recap of course 1.
So friends, you'll remember that in the very first course, we had you look at your own story, taking a hold of your life. And as you're at your midpoint in second half, it's important to become self-aware about where you've been and where you are, the good and the bad, and where you think you're going. So if you recall, we talked about setting your sail, and that was helping you establish where you want to go in this course. And that while many things in life you do not control, you can set your sail. You can't control the wind or the water, but you can control your sail. And that's how it is with life. We're hoping that you want to sail your second half well. Then we talked about Kairos moments, which is really helping us to understand and recognize the times when God did step in and get our attention. In fact, the more you think about this, friends, the more you realize your life is full of God's Kairos moments. Many times he steps in. It's really helpful to be aware that God is intimately involved in your story and in your journey. And then we had you dig for gold. And that was looking back in your story and discovering and accepting the value of all the moments of your life because they're part of your story and God brings good out of them all. And then we recognize, though, that we do go through transitions, understanding that there are times when we feel that we're disoriented and that we're in a moving point and we're not sure where the future is. Understanding where you are right now and how that happens for you emotionally. Really helpful to navigate those times. Then we talked about expanding your horizons, learning how to think, the importance of stretching your mind, talked about reading, talk about thinking with your whole brain, because your second half will require more of you. And then we talked about second half spirituality, identifying the ways you've actually grown and adjusted your understanding and your expression of spirituality over the years, that you have not just remained at a static level in your spiritual development, but God has been purposely developing you further into your second half. And things are different in the second half, even with your spirituality. So that, friends, was when you took a look at your life and you got a hold of what was going on.
Right. So that was course one, if you can remember back that far. Maybe some of you haven't progressed as fast as you would like to. And so course one wasn't that long ago, actually. But in course number two, we moved from looking backward to looking inward. So going deeper into why you do what you do. So we started it off with something we called Johari window. Looking at the Johari window was a tool to identify how open or closed you are. Remember the blind spots, and then there is that black quadrant that no one really knows about, including yourself. And all this presented like a Johari window, and you could know yourself or know others a little bit better. Then we moved into the big module of course number two, and that was prioritizing values. This was a process for identifying your top 5 values, basically what you care about most. And that has a way of driving you. Then we looked at 2 specific values that, as Christian leaders, are of utmost importance to us. One is establishing integrity. And it's so important to Christian character, obviously. And the other one was building trust, looking at how trust is built and why it's the one thing that can change everything. Then for the spiritual formation in course 2, we spent a couple of modules on hearing God's voice. There is nothing more significant in the discussion of who you are and why than hearing God's voice on the matter. God knows who you are and knows why you are. And so we go to him to hear, God, teach me about myself.
Yes, John, I absolutely agree that hearing God's voice is a critical component for us to be assured and encouraged that God is involved in your life. And he actually does speak to you and he guides you. And part of our journeys of spiritual development is learning to listen.
Yeah.
So course number 3, we talked about tightening the grip on your strengths, because this is the way God's made you. And getting an understanding of that is really helpful. And we started off by talking about the Clifton Strengths Assessment, and where you understand what are some of the built-in strengths that God has put within you. We also talked about the need to steward your life, to expand your capacity. And we challenge you to set some goals to improve the 4 main energy areas of your life. That, folks, is a really practical piece, which becomes increasingly more important in your second half. You do have to pay attention to those 4. And if you do it well, you can have capacity right into your senior years. So we encourage you to add life to your years by expanding your capacity. Then we talked about following your dreams. Considering, again, maybe ideas and goals that you have never acted on or that are kind of buried by busyness or bruised by hard things in life, that those dreams are within you and that they're meant to come out. And you need to explore them and see if there's a way to, in your second half, to actually follow through on some of those dreams. In the spiritual formation piece, we talked about Trinitarian faith and to realize that we have been on a journey in our faith, and God has been carefully and faithfully and strategically giving us an experience of God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. And maybe it'll help identify for you an aspect of this triune God that you need to fully explore and engage. And we recognize that there are pathways to doing that. There are sacred pathways. Similar uh, facts that there are different ways that we would experience God, and that you probably have a favorite one or two. And we encourage you to look at more pathways because, folks, we want you to be able to have an increasing appreciation for what God is doing in your life and who he is and how he wants to interact with you.
Mm. And it's so exhilarating to know that we can connect with God in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Even when we're taught one or two ways, when we actually experience God, we realize he's made more dimensions to our faith than just one or two ways of experiencing him. So that piece on sacred pathways, and there's 9 of them, for some people was a real eye-opener, and it set them free to experience God in more ways than one.
Yeah, especially if the way you've been practicing is kind of gotten, let's say, boring or like, okay, what else?
Right.
That's your feeling in your spiritual life. It's time to explore more pathways.
Right. Okay, so that was the first year. So the first 3 courses were basically focused on you. The next 3 courses, we went beyond you to those around you. We moved away from self-awareness to being more aware of others in your life. So we started course 4 with leading teams. This was when we talked through the ministry insights assessment. You remember that one, leading from your strengths? And we discussed the importance of every team member finding their place. We are all better when every team member is firing on all cylinders. And that led us into, okay, how are we going to empower people? Our team is good for us and we work well with this team. And then it goes to more to individuals. How can I empower someone? This was more about our influence one-on-one in coaching and mentoring than it was about teams. So dealing with it on 2 different levels there. And then again, individually or how we connect with people was talking about maximizing conversations, a huge module in the CREST leadership development in all courses. This is one that people respond to so well. It helped us with some principles for making the most of our communication with others. And then right on the heels of that is managing conflict, which helped us recognize when those conversations don't go well. And if you're dealing with people, you're probably going to have to deal with conflict. And there are healthy ways and unhealthy ways of dealing with conflict. Yeah, and if you have communication which leads to conflict, it all revolves around words.
Mm-hmm.
So the power of words,
yes,
is one of the spiritual formation pieces that we talked about. The underlying force behind all this is our words. Then we talked about a specific kind of coaching and mentoring, which is called spiritual direction. And this was a challenge to engage in spiritual conversations and communication to keep us aligned with the Lord's will in our lives. Revelation often comes through conversation. And when that conversation is spiritual, then spiritual revelation can come through that. It's an amazing way the Lord works.
Yes. Then course number 5 was creating clarity for your strategy. You need to be intentional now. If you want to go from here to there, what will you do? How can you put your life from here to there? And maybe how can you bring others from here to there? And so this is where we talked about setting targets, focusing our attention on the few things that we want to do well. And those are the things that we ended up in that, remember the playbook? We're saying, let's just get intentional about a few things. And we talked about enhancing your productivity. And we presented you some tools to help you get things done. We talked about mind mapping, PERT charts. And friends, these are tools that John and I use every day.
Mhm.
And it is absolutely very helpful and practical to actually practice these new tools. And we want to just pass on these good ideas to you. These tools do make life more productive. Then we looked at leading change. How do we bring about change? Because when we want to move ourselves or people from here to there, that's change, friends. And we want to help you know how to do that. And so we gave you some ideas about leading change. In fact, in our master's course, we dive even deeper into that one, because that's a critically important one in leadership. So you may want to think about that for your master's degree. Then we also gave you a tool of how to process ideas, especially ideas that need to be processed with a group of people. And wow, does that one ever help engage people in a productive conversation that helps us think through an idea from all different angles. And then for the spiritual formation piece, we talked about the Christian story. Again, looking back to see where we have been, where we are now, and where God may be taking us as a whole part of his great plan with the Christian story.
So that's the content of the first 5 courses. And there's a lot of information to process. Our hope and belief is that the right things will stick. The other things are in the right place. In other words, in your curriculum, in your notes that you've taken, they're in the right place for when the right time comes. And you can pull that out and look at it, and it will be a great resource for you. That goes for the books you are reading as well. Some will be the right book at the right time. Other books will be hard to get through because, well, maybe they just aren't connecting with you as well. But we encourage you to work through them. Then someday you'll be able to go back because you know what they're about. So you work through it now, you find out what it's about, that registers with you so that later when you really need it, you know where to go to get it. And that's a part of learning. So once again, we encourage you to engage your online cohort through Slack and talk with each other about these things. You can really help each other. The next video is focused on the theme of embracing endings and works through the content of the book Necessary Endings by Dr. Henry Cloud. So we'll see you then.